Nick Valencia, thank you for that. Now, this today near New York City, 7 members of the U.S. Congress literally pounding on the door of a migrant detention center. They demanded to be let inside, and the people in charge said no.
Members of Congress were entitled to do this.
Now you did wrong. Now you did wrong. You were doing fine up until now. Now you did wrong. This is America. This isn't Moscow.
7 Democratic lawmakers from New York and New Jersey there. They wanted to talk to people inside who were being held by immigration officials. Eventually, they were allowed inside. No cell phones, no cameras, and they were allowed to speak to detainees. CNN's Polo Sandoval is in Elizabeth, New Jersey with this story. Polo.
Well, Anna, certainly some bizarre moments have played out at this immigrant detention facility in Elizabeth, New Jersey earlier today. 7 Democratic lawmakers traveling here to meet with 5 of the roughly 250 undocumented people who have been detained at this facility. Initially, when they arrived, hoping to meet with these 5 men on Father's Day, they were denied access. Instead, some of the staff here had to call supervisors and eventually even local police to try to sort all of this out. After about an hour and 45-minute wait, we watched these 7 Democratic lawmakers finally make their way inside, visiting away from the cameras, visiting with these 5 individuals, and then finally came out a short time later telling us about what they saw in there, sharing some of those emotional stories. Some of those men recounting how they were separated from their children at the border when they were detained before they were transferred here. Important to point out, these kinds of surprise visits from legislators are certainly nothing unusual, though they are extraordinary. Not too long ago, we witnessed some of these scenes play out here in other parts of Texas, tomorrow in California. The message that lawmakers are hoping to send to the Trump administration is that they end this practice of separating children from their families on it.
All right. On this Father's Day, we are reporting on scared children being taken from their parents and held in government processing centers near the U.S. border. And I want to show you this, some brand new images from the Border Patrol showing children trying to sleep on mats inside a detention facility. This one is in McAllen, Texas, and these are images that we can show you because they have been provided by Customs and Border Patrol, but this is all they're letting us show you. They will not let us in to film our own images. A short time ago, I spoke to Senator Jeff Merkley, who today toured a government facility processing some of these children. Watch.
We did, of course, see the children who were held inside here in wire mesh chain link cages that are about 30 by 30, a lot of young folks put into them. It is inflicting enormous trauma on the children and enormous angst on the parents to engage in this family separation. And there is no need at all, no justification of any kind for doing so as people await asylum hearings.
I want to bring in Dr. Julie Linton. She is a pediatrician and spokeswoman for the American Academy of Pediatrics. Doctor, thanks for taking the time for us on your Sunday afternoon or evening. You know, we're showing these images, kids being held in cages, other children in processing centers or detention centers away from their parents. We're hearing the stories of children being taken from parents, parents being told that the kids are just going to the bathroom. How do you even begin to measure? Oh, sorry, I'm going to have to come back to this question. We have a live press conference happening right now at the border. These are the senators who have been just inside Brownsville, Texas, telling us what they saw.
Are not with their parents. The vast bulk of these children, we're told, arrived on the border unaccompanied, as unaccompanied minors. But a certain share of them came with their parents and then were separated from their parents. And here we're told that the percentage of kids who were separated from their parents is smaller, that they feel only about 5% of the kids at this facility, because these are older kids, 10 years and up, whereas a larger percentage of the unaccompanied or the children separated are younger. I want to be very, very clear on this point. Southwest Keys is a nonprofit that's worked with kids for a long period of time. Separations do not occur here. We have 2 different sections of the federal government involved. We have the Department of Homeland Security that runs the border control stations. That's where separations occur. Their children are then sent here to be cared for. So do not confuse this facility with what is happening with the separations. That's happening elsewhere. at the border processing facilities. So let's turn to just the heart of this, and that is we have this new policy from the federal government that Attorney General Sessions and President Trump and Steve Miller and John Kelly, the Chief of Staff, have put together that decided to do, they call it zero tolerance. But a better name for it is zero humanity, and there's zero logic to this policy. The administration is arguing that by inflicting this harm on children and parents, this stress, that they're sending a message, a deterrent message for people not to seek asylum in the United States. It's completely unacceptable under any moral code or under any religious tradition to injure children, inflict trauma on them in order to send some political message to adults somewhere overseas. The president is also arguing in the last few days that this policy gives him political leverage with legislation. Hurting kids to get legislative leverage is unacceptable. It is evil. I'm going to turn this over to my colleagues to share some thoughts and reflections on what we saw inside, and then we'll open it up to your questions.
Well, again, I want to thank Senator Merkley for bringing us together. We were just visiting this facility, Southwest Key Programs, and I want to emphasize the point that the people who are working there are doing the best they can with the kids that are there under a very bad situation that has been given to them in large part because of this change in policy by the Trump administration. As Senator Merkley said, they have a fair share of kids here from the separation policy. I think it was about 100 or so here. Most of the kids that have been separated from their parents are at other facilities in this area, some of them that are run by the same organization, and they're under 10 years old. And what they told us was most of the kids who are being separated from their families are under 10 years old, and most of them are under different facilities in this area. And make no mistake, that is a direct result of the Trump administration policy of separating parents from their kids, because they've told us that they've seen a huge spike in the number of those kids over the last 6 weeks. So clearly it's a result of a policy decision. And what is so cynical about it, as Senator Merkley said, is it is, number one, supposed to try to send a deterrent effect, which it doesn't when you're trying to flee violence and a threat to your life and your family's life. But in recent days, the President of the United States is literally holding these kids separated from their parents as hostage to try to pass his version of some kind of immigration legislation that's not related to the need to separate parents from their families. A lot of other issues he's trying to deal with on the immigration front. And so it is a cynical, evil policy to try to hold these kids hostage, separate them from their parents in order to try to gain leverage. The president could change this policy today. He could change it right now. He could change it on Father's Day and make sure some of these kids can be reunited with their dads and their moms. And now I'm going to turn it over to one of our colleagues here from the House of Representatives. Sheila Jackson-Lee.
Thank you, Senator, and I think all of us are going to echo our appreciation to Senator Merkley for really this pointed and provocative Codell mission of members of Congress. I'd like to call it a mission of mercy, and I want to emphasize that the facility we just visited, the Southwest Key Casa Padre, are doing the best that they can for children, for a policy that as a member of the Judiciary Committee I helped structure some 10 years ago, which related only to the place for unaccompanied children who made their way across the border by themselves. The president is not telling the truth. There is no law, there is no policy that has allowed him to snatch children away from their families. There is absolutely no policy. His representation is a patent untruth, and out of politeness, I'm not using the stronger word. But he is not telling the truth. And it's important for the American people to understand that the immigration policies that we are espousing are openly a humane policy, a comprehensive policy. No one here is arguing for bad guys to be allowed into the United States. We are fighting to the very end for children who are snatched away from their families. And we have seen mothers who we've been able to briefly talk with who've expressed fear that the child that they're holding in their hands, the 45-day baby to this mother who made it 2,000 miles, will be forever lost to her. Finally, I think it is important that not only have we made a ugly statement to Americans to disregard that all of us are immigrants except our Native American friends, but now the United Nations High Commissioner has attacked the United States for violating international human rights, and the only response that the president could give was that it was an ignorant attack. So we have the international shame and the domestic shame. This week, Judiciary Committee members will introduce legislation to stop President Trump from separating children from their families, from snatching them. And the real question is whether Republicans will join us to say to the president, enough is enough. I hope that there is enough mercy to do so, but I can assure you we'll be fighting to the end to stop this ugly, vile program that is harming children and creating massive child abuse. Mr. Welch, thank you.
You know, it's pretty heartbreaking to be in that building and to see these kids aged 10 to 17, 18, who had these incredible journeys, had to leave where they live in order to live. That's literally what happened. And we've got an explosion in the population here now, just in the last several weeks, as a result of the new policy by the Trump administration. And we're coming to the close of our day, but there's two things that stand out for me. One is I've seen a lot of tremendous workers, including in there, who want to do whatever they can for these kids. We just saw some Border Patrol people who took us around. They were taking care of a mom who made an 8-month journey and had a 2-month-old child, and they were doing everything they could to help her. But then you see the policy of Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions and Jeff Miller that basically is saying, we're going to separate a child from a parent. And it's appalling. It's un-American. It's unnecessary. And, you know, cynical is too light a word for it. I mean, when the President of the United States, to get tough on immigration policy, you know what? He's entitled to have that. He's entitled to have it. What he's not entitled to have is a hostage, a young, innocent child, whether it's a dreamer who was brought here by his or her parents, or it's these kids who showed up with their parents when they were knocking on the door, asking the greatest country on earth, the country of freedom and the Statue of Liberty, for help. That's all it was. And the president is making that a crime. And that he is using that as a tactic to try to get his way on an immigration bill, and is willing to sacrifice the well-being of these children, the heartbreak of the parents, is appalling and beyond cynical. It's got to stop.
Good afternoon, David Cicilline from Rhode Island. I want to thank Senator Merkley for organizing our visit. This has been a really difficult day, and if it's difficult for us, it's been even more difficult for the children we visited with. There's sort of an old, very long-standing proposition in the law in our country, and that is that when it comes to children, the decisions always have to be made in the best interest of the child. And there is no interpretation of that standard that would ever suggest separating young children from their mothers is in the best interest of a child. It may be in the best interest of a political strategy for the president or a negotiating technique, but it's really abominable. It's detestable. It undermines all the things our country stands for. And while I was impressed with the services that this organization is attempting to provide, there's been a huge spike in the population of children in that facility. Started off with just about 300, then went to 500, then 1,200, then 1,500, and now they're anticipating further growth in the population of children in that facility. And this is all occasioned by a change of policy by this president just a few weeks ago, about 6 weeks ago, in consultation with the Attorney General Sessions, with Stephen Miller, who somehow concocted this hideous scheme that if we just take away children from their parents, that somehow we can help stem the tide of people who are leaving persecution and violence and coming to America for protection, that somehow we'll be successful in doing that. It's a terrible policy. It undermines all that we stand for as a country. It's a terrible example to the world. We are committed to going back and doing everything we can to stop this, as Congresswoman Jackson Lee said. We wanted to see this and bring attention to this so that we can encourage the American people to be part of this effort to demand that the administration and the president reverse this policy immediately.